Have you ever wondered if psychic spying could actually be a real thing? Well, you're not the only one. So did the CIA. Today, we're going to crack open a declassified document that seriously reads like something out of a sci-fi novel. It's called the Coordinate Remote Viewing Manual, and it's basically a step-by-step guide for teaching military spies how to see things beyond the reach of their normal senses.
But, and this is a big but, right off the bat we get this really important disclaimer from the guy who actually wrote it, retired Major Paul H. Smith. He says they didn't really write it as a how-to guide for just anyone. It was more about documenting the process they used, which, only makes you lean in a little closer and wonder,
So, yeah, how was it all supposed to work then? If this wasn't just some simple instruction booklet, what was this incredibly detailed process they were teaching to their intelligence officers? Well, we're going to break it down, stage by stage, using the manual itself as our map.
All right, so this manual was put together back in 1986. The whole point was to lock down a very specific method that was developed at SRI International for a top-secret military remote viewing unit. I mean, think about it. They were trying to create a repeatable, almost scientific process for something that seems totally mysterious.
So what is remote viewing? The manual defines it as using your mind to get information that's blocked by distance or walls or even time. The coordinate part is key. The whole process kicks off with just a set of geographic coordinates. That's it. The idea is that those numbers act like a phone number, letting you dial into what they call a signal line of pure information coming right from the target.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Stage I is the absolute bedrock of this whole thing. It's where the viewer makes that very first contact with the target. Everything that comes after depends on getting this first moment right. No pressure, right?
And the key to stage 1 is something called the ideogram. Now, this is not a drawing. The manual is super clear about this. It's supposed to be a completely spontaneous, reflexive mark. Just think of it like a jolt of psychic energy that travels down your nervous system, through your arm, and explodes onto the page before your conscious mind even has a chance to ask, hey, what was that?
So after that jolt hits the paper, you have to decode it. And they had this incredibly rigid structure for doing that called the IAB sequence. First, you make the ideogram, that's I. Immediately after, you decode its feeling and motion, that's A. So for something like a mountain, it might feel like rising, peaking, coming down, solid. Then comes B, the very first noun that pops into your head, like structure. All right, so once you've made that initial connection, we move to stage 2. The theory here is that your mental aperture starts to open up a little wider, and that allows more information to start flowing in, specifically raw sensory data. In stage 2, the viewer starts getting these really basic sensory words. It's almost like they're physically standing at the target site, picking up on textures, colors, smells, and sounds. The key here is just to report these simple, raw feelings, like gritty or hazy, without trying to piece them together into a coherent picture just yet. And now, we take a really big leap. We go from those simple, basic senses to actually perceiving shapes, forms, and the physical layout of the target. This is where the sight really starts to take on a dimensional quality in the viewer's mind. And the signal that you're moving into stage 3 is this really fascinating thing called the aesthetic impact, or AI. It's described as a sudden, personal, emotional jolt you get from the sight, a feeling of awe or maybe vertigo, disgust, even claustrophobia. The protocol is to just declare it out loud, take a beat, and let that feeling pass before you move on. So after you process that big emotional hit, you're finally ready to start translating what you're perceiving into a physical form. You start making these quick, spontaneous sketches to capture the shapes and contours of whatever it is you're seeing. But this is also where you run into the single biggest enemy of remote viewing, something they call analytic overlay, or AOL. This is basically your conscious brain trying to be helpful, jumping to conclusions. It's that over-eager autocorrect that sees some angles in metal and immediately screams, "It's a bridge," when the real signal might be something else entirely.
So, how do you tell the difference? Well, the manual says a true psychic signal feels fuzzy, indistinct, kind of fading in and out. But an AOL feels sharp, clear, and static, almost like a perfect photograph that just popped into your head. The real discipline is learning to recognize when your brain is just making stuff up, declare it as an AOL, and push it aside.
Okay, now we're getting into the advanced stages. At this point, that mental aperture is wide open. And the challenge isn't so much getting information anymore, but managing the absolute flood of complex data and abstract ideas that are coming through.
And to keep from getting totally overwhelmed, Stage 4 introduces a tool for organization, a matrix. It's basically a chart that lets the viewer sort all this incoming psychic data into different categories as it's happening, in real time.
And this is what that matrix looks like. You've got columns for everything, basic sensory data, dimensionals, and even columns for tangibles, like metal or building, and intangibles, which could be anything from a military feeling to a sense of emptiness. It's a filing system for a psychic data dump.
So what happens when you get one of those abstract, intangible ideas like religious? You can't just write that down and move on. You need more detail. Stage 5 is all about how you interrogate these big concepts to get to the specifics. The process is called probing for emanations. So if you get the word religious, you would use the Stage 5 structure to ask yourself questions to pull out related objects like candles, attributes like dimly lit, or subjects like people worshiping. It's a way of drilling down deep into the data you're getting.
And that brings us to the final step, Stage VI, which is the culmination of this entire process. Here, the viewer actually gets hands-on and starts building a three-dimensional model of the target site, usually with something like clay. The idea is that the physical act of building the model unlocks even more detail and insight.
And there you have it, a highly structured, six-stage process designed for the U.S. military. The goal was to take a faint, mysterious psychic signal and systematically decode it, piece by piece, until you had a detailed, actionable report about a secret target anywhere on Earth.
You know, when you step back and look at the whole thing, it's just fascinating. What they created was essentially a bureaucratic manual for psychic perception. They tried to apply this rigid structure of forms and stages and matrices to the incredibly fluid and mysterious world of the human mind. It's a procedure for intuition. In the end, the program was shut down, but the manual lives on. And it really leaves us with this huge, provocative question. Was this whole thing a glimpse into a failed science, a misunderstood art form, or was it a structured path into an entirely different way of knowing things? The manual doesn't give us the answer. It only gives us the method.